For 20 years, Admiral Harlan Briggs lived as a prisoner inside his own body, paralyzed from the waist down since an ambush in Iraq. The finest civilian neurologists wrote him off as a lost cause. When his daughter brings him, in one final act of hope, to Boston's prestigious neurological center, the arrogant Dr. Prescott humiliates the old veteran in front of everyone and orders the shift nurse, Hannah Whitlock, to wheel him out. But Hannah looks at the scar on the Admiral's neck and recognizes something nobody else has seen in 2 decades, something she herself studied inside a locked room at Walter Reed in a program that officially never existed. And when her hands touch his spine, 20 years of silence begin to break. What comes next, not even the finest doctor in that hospital would have dared to believe. If this story pulls you in, do me a small favor before we go further. Tap that like button, drop a comment telling me what city or country you're listening from, and hit subscribe to join this family. Welcome to the channel, and let's begin. Dr. Edwin Prescott did not like Mondays. He stood at the consultation desk in his pressed white coat, watching the wall clock as if it owed him money. His silver hair was parted with the precision of a man photographed for medical journals. The gold pin on his lapel said, Department Chair, Neurology, Bayford Memorial. Across the hall, patients waited. They always waited at Bayford. Prescott considered this part of the cure. Hannah Whitlock did not wait. Hannah moved. She had been on the floor since 5:50 that morning, and by 8:30 she had restocked Bay 4, set up 2 EMG carts, calmed a stroke patient's wife in the hallway, and replaced an IV line the night shift had run dry. Her dark auburn hair was pulled into a low knot at the base of her skull. Loose strands escaped at her temples. Her scrubs were bright, vivid blue. A small enamel pin sat above her name tag, a faded olive branch on a navy field. Nobody had ever asked what it meant. Her right hand, the one with the thin shrapnel scar running from her wrist to the base of her thumb, rested on the chart rail. Light freckles dusted the bridge of her nose. 5 feet 41 years old. Lean, quiet. Invisible by design. Whitlock. Prescott did not look at her. He spoke to the wall clock. Coffee. Black. No sugar. And tell Marcia I want the 8:30 file before I sit down. Coffee's on your desk, doctor. Marcia brought it at 8:15. Prescott's lips thinned. Then go check on the new arrival in Bay 6. Family case. VA referral. I have not decided whether I will see it. Yes, doctor. She walked. Bay 6 sat at the end of the corridor. Through the glass, Hannah saw 3 figures. A woman in her late 30s, dark blonde, gripping the handles of a wheelchair. A boy of maybe 19, in a community college sweatshirt. And in the chair, a man. Big ones. You could see it in the shoulders. Now those shoulders sagged forward. His hands were folded in his lap like 2 stones that had stopped fitting together. He wore a dark cardigan over a faded blue dress shirt. The collar was open, and in the soft hollow above his collarbone, just to the left of his trachea, Hannah saw it. A thin, raised surgical scar. Old, maybe 2 decades old. The kind of scar a civilian surgeon does not make. Hannah's hand paused on the door handle. She had not seen that scar in 11 years. Not since Walter Reed. Not since the locked room on sub-level 2. Not since the program that on paper never existed. She breathed in through her nose, pushed the door open. Good morning. I'm Hannah Whitlock. I'll be your intake nurse this morning. The daughter looked up first. Her eyes were rimmed red but dry. I'm Caroline Briggs. This is my brother Eli. And this is my father, Admiral Harlan Briggs, United States Navy retired. Hannah did not react. Her training would not let her. But inside, something small and quiet shifted. The way a compass needle finds north again after being held off course for a long time. It's an honor to meet you, sir. The Admiral did not raise his head. He looked at his hands. His jaw was set. The skin under his eyes was the color of old paper. Ma'am, just that. Caroline kept talking because someone had to. We've been to Mayo, Johns Hopkins, 2 clinics in Germany. My father took shrapnel in his lumbar spine from an IED outside Mosul in 2004. Every doctor has told us the same thing. The damage is permanent. The cord is severed at L1. But last year a Navy doctor at Bethesda said there was a man at this hospital, Dr. Prescott, who had published something about residual nerve pathway recovery. We waited 8 months for this appointment. Hannah looked at the file in the chart sleeve. She did not open it. She did not have to. She already knew what was inside. May I check your vitals, Admiral? The Admiral lifted his head finally. His eyes were the color of slate after rain. Go ahead, ma'am. She wrapped the cuff, placed her stethoscope. 62/130/84 cool skin. Her hand did not shake. Then, gently, she moved his collar aside half an inch. The scar ran 2 inches along the lateral side of his neck, just behind the sternocleidomastoid. A clean, deliberate line. The kind of incision made for vagal nerve access. The kind of incision the civilian world had not yet learned how to use in 2004. The kind of incision Hannah herself had practiced 3,000 times on cadavers in a basement no one was allowed to photograph. She did not let her face move. "Admiral, did you receive any procedures in theater?" The Admiral looked at her for a long moment. He was a man who had spent his life reading other men's faces. He read hers now. "There was a corpsman out in the field. He did something to my neck before the bird came. I never knew what." Hannah closed his collar back over the scar. "Thank you, sir." Behind them, the glass door swung open. Dr. Prescott walked in. He did not greet the family. He lifted the chart, flipped 2 pages, closed it. "Mr. Briggs." Caroline's spine stiffened. "Admiral Briggs, Doctor." Prescott looked up as if noticing her for the first time. "Mr. Briggs, I have reviewed your file. There is nothing to discuss. The damage to your spinal cord is, as every prior consultant has noted, the lesion is at L1. There is no surgical intervention, no therapy, and no experimental protocol that can restore function to a cord transected for 20 years. Caroline's hand went white on the handle. "Doctor, we were told you had published research." "Madam, research is research. Patients are patients. Your father is, with respect, a man in his late 60s whose spinal injury is older than my fellowship. I cannot ethically take his money. I cannot ethically take your time." He turned without pausing. "Whitlock, discharge them. Send them down to social work for a referral list of long-term care options." Hannah did not move. She did not answer. She stood by the head of the wheelchair, her hand resting on the chair frame, and she looked at Dr. Prescott. Eli looked at his father. His father was staring at the floor. The Admiral did not lift his head. He did not argue. He had stopped arguing about himself a long time ago. That, more than anything, was what broke something loose inside Hannah Whitlock. "Dr. Prescott." Her voice was low, even. "May I have a word with you in the hall?" Prescott blinked once. The room fell still. The fluorescent hum overhead seemed louder for a moment. Then he smiled the small, tight smile of a man who had just been mildly entertained. "Whitlock, I do not take medical direction from nursing staff. Discharge the patient." He turned to leave. "Dr. Prescott." Same volume, same flatness. The Admiral lifted his head. He had heard a voice like that before, in a different desert, but the same voice. Prescott stopped at the door, turned. "I beg your pardon. I would like a word, doctor, in the hall, before this family leaves." For 3 full seconds, no one breathed. Then Prescott laughed. A short, brittle laugh. "Very well." He stepped out. Hannah turned to Caroline. "Ma'am, don't leave this room. Don't move that chair. I'll be back in 2 minutes." Caroline nodded. The corridor was empty. Prescott crossed his arms. "Make this short, Whitlock, and make it the last conversation of this kind you ever start with me." Hannah did not cross her arms. Her hands stayed loose at her sides. "Doctor, the Admiral has a lateral neck scar behind the sternocleidomastoid, about 2 inches, clean, 20 years old, give or take. And it is a field vagal access incision, cervical approach to the vagus nerve for acute hemorrhagic shock stabilization in spinal trauma, developed by Army Special Operations Medical Research between 2003 and 2007, classified until 2016, never published in civilian neurology literature." Prescott stared at her. "What did you just say?" "I said the corpsman in the field that night did something to the Admiral's fresses, neck that nobody at Mayo Hopkins or Berlin would have known to look for, and if he received that intervention within 90 minutes of injury, his cord may not have transected at L1. It may have entered a state of prolonged conduction block, 20 years of disuse atrophy on top of that. But the cord itself, doctor, may still be intact." Prescott's jaw worked. "Whitlock, you will return to that room. You will apologize to me in front of that family. You will discharge that patient, and then you will go to HR and submit your resignation. Do you understand me?" Hannah did not blink. She turned, opened the door to Bay 6, and walked back inside. Caroline was standing in the same place. Eli had not moved. The Admiral had lifted his head and was watching the door. Hannah walked to the side of the wheelchair. She crouched so that her face was level with his. Her right hand, the one with the shrapnel scar, rested on the armrest. She did not touch him yet. "Admiral Briggs." Her voice was very quiet. "I would like to examine the back of your neck and your lower spine. With your permission, I am not going to promise you anything. I am not going to lie to you. I have not done this in 11 years, but I think the corpsman in the desert that night may have saved more of you than anyone in 20 years has known how to look for. May I have your permission, sir?" The Admiral looked at her for a long, long time. He looked at the olive branch pin above her name tag, the small scar on her right hand, the steadiness in her green eyes. He had spent 40 years of his life learning to read sailors and Marines and corpsmen and combat surgeons. He read her now, and in the quiet of that small glass-walled room, a Navy admiral who had not asked anyone for anything in 20 years lifted his chin half an inch. "Yes, ma'am. You may." The glass door of Bay 6 opened with a soft hiss, and Dr. Prescott walked back inside. His face had settled on the flat gray of a man who had decided to enjoy what came next. "Whitlock, I have just called patient services. Mr. Briggs will be discharged in 15 minutes. You will assist them to the elevator. You will return to this department, and you will meet me in my office at 11. Is that clear?" Hannah did not stand up. She did not look at Prescott. She kept her eyes on the Admiral. The Admiral kept his eyes on her. "Whitlock, a little louder." "Doctor," her voice came out very calm, "I'm going to perform a brief neurological assessment on the patient. With his consent, it will take 6 minutes. After that, the family can make an informed decision." Prescott's jaw tightened. "You will do no such thing." "I'm going to, Doctor." Caroline took half a step forward. Eli planted his feet beside the wheelchair as though he had decided without anyone telling him that he was now a wall. "I want her to," Caroline said. "We waited 8 months, and we have not had 10 minutes of a real exam. Madam, your father's chart has been reviewed by 4 neurologists at this institution alone. He is not a candidate for any intervention. I am going to ask you one time to step aside." No, it was the Admiral. He had not raised his voice. He did not have to. He had spoken to a 40,000-ton ship from a flag bridge for 20 years before he ever needed a microphone. The word filled the small glass room and stayed there. Prescott blinked. The Admiral lifted his head another half-inch. "Doctor, I have been spoken to my entire adult life by men with bars on their shoulders, men with stars on their collars, men with their hand on the launch authorization of a Trident submarine. I do not require your permission to allow a woman to put her hands on the back of my neck for 6 more minutes." Prescott opened his mouth, closed it. Hannah stood slowly. She walked to the supply cabinet, opened it, and removed 3 items: a small penlight, a reflex hammer, and a thin, flat-folded square of gray fabric sealed inside a clear pouch. The pouch was unmarked. She placed it on the rolling tray. Prescott took 1 step forward. "What is that?" "Reflex hammer. The pouch. Whitlock." "What is in the pouch?" She lifted the pouch. The fabric inside was a peripheral nerve stimulation mat, hand-sewn with 12 copper contact points arranged in a pattern that no civilian medical supply company in the United States manufactured. It was 11 years old. She had carried it in the bottom of her work bag for every shift she had ever worked at Bayford Memorial. She had never opened it until now. "It's a stim mat, Doctor." "A what?" "Peripheral nerve stimulation array, 12-point, manual." Prescott's face had begun to lose color around the eyes. "That is not standard equipment." "No, Doctor, it is not." She unsealed the pouch. The fabric unfolded onto the rolling tray. The copper contacts caught the overhead light in 12 small, dull points. Caroline stared. Eli stared. The Admiral did not look at it. He was watching Hannah's face. "Whitlock." Prescott's voice had gone thin. "I am going to call security." "You can, Doctor, but before you do, I am going to ask the Admiral one question." "Sir, may I have permission to remove your cardigan and your shirt down to the waist?" "Yes, ma'am." Caroline moved first. She slid the gray wool blanket off her father's lap. She unbuttoned the cardigan with fingers that were trembling for the first time that morning. Eli helped lift his father's arms. The Admiral did not flinch. The faded blue shirt came off. Underneath, his torso was the torso of a man who had been strong once and had been still for too long. White chest hair gone gray. A long, pale scar across the lower abdomen. The skin of his back, when he leaned forward into his son's chest, was paper-thin over the bones of his shoulder blades. And at the base of his neck, just below the hairline, Hannah saw the second scar, smaller than the first, about half an inch, round, almost a freckle. To anyone else, in a civilian exam room, it would have looked like an old skin tag removal. Hannah closed her eyes for half a second, opened them, Doctor, Prescott, come look at this. Prescott did not move. Doctor. She did not turn around. I am going to give you a chance right now to be in this room for the next 20 minutes, because if I am right, and I think I am, this is going to be in a journal next year, and your name will not be on the paper unless you stand here and witness it. Prescott did not move, but he did not leave. Hannah leaned in. She placed the pad of her right index finger gently on the small round scar at the base of the Admiral's neck. Her left hand rested flat on his upper back, between his shoulder blades. She closed her eyes. She breathed, and she pressed just slightly with her index finger. The Admiral made a sound. It was not a word. It was a small, broken intake of breath. The kind of sound a person makes when something they had stopped feeling 20 years ago sends back a single faint signal from a long way away. Caroline gasped. Eli's hand went to his mouth. Prescott took 2 steps forward. What did you just do? Hannah opened her eyes. I pressed on the implant marker, doctor. The what? There is a subcutaneous marker under that scar, about 4 millimeters across. It tells anyone who knows what they are looking at that the patient received a subdermal vagal conduction bridge in the field. The bridge does not heal a transected cord. It maintains conduction continuity across a damaged segment indefinitely by routing low-amplitude signals along the vagus pathway as a parallel circuit. Doctor, the Admiral's spinal cord has not been silent for 20 years. It has been on standby. Prescott stared. That technology does not exist. It does, doctor. It just doesn't exist in your literature. Caroline's voice was barely a whisper. Is he going to walk? Hannah turned to her. Ma'am, I don't know. I have not done this in 11 years. The implant may have degraded. 20 years of disuse is 20 years of disuse. But I can tell you one thing. Your father felt that pressure. I saw his trapezius tense on his left side, which means signal is moving, which means there is a road, even if it is a long one. She turned back to the Admiral. Sir, I am going to lay the stim mat across your lumbar spine. I am going to manually pulse 12 contact points in a specific sequence. You may feel pins and needles. You may feel heat. You may feel nothing. If you feel pain, you will say so, and I will stop. Yes, ma'am. Eli, help your father lean forward over the pillow. The boy moved without thinking. He placed the pillow against his own chest and let his father rest his weight against it. The Admiral's bare back was now fully exposed. Hannah unfolded the stim mat. She placed it across his lower back, contacts down, copper to skin. From a small pocket sewn into one corner, she removed a tiny black handheld controller, no larger than a key fob, with a single dial and a single button. She turned the dial to 1. She pressed the button. The Admiral inhaled sharply. Pins and needles, sir? Yes. Where? Left hip, down to the knee. Hannah's hand did not shake. Good. Caroline was crying now, silently. Tears were running freely down her cheeks. Hannah turned the dial to 2. She pressed the button. The Admiral's right thigh under the gray slacks twitched. Not a spasm. Not an involuntary jerk. A small, ordered, voluntary contraction of the quadriceps. He had not contracted that muscle on command since 2004. The Admiral looked down at his own leg. He did not speak. Eli began to cry the way young men cry when they have been holding it in for too many years. He did not move. He did not make a sound. The tears just ran. Hannah turned the dial to 3. She paused. She looked up at Dr. Prescott. Prescott was 3 feet from the wheelchair. His arms had fallen to his sides. The tablet was still in his right hand, but he had forgotten it was there. Doctor, if you want to be the neurologist of record for this case, you may stand to my left and observe. If you want to leave this room and call security, you may do that as well. But I'm going to finish the assessment either way. Prescott did not speak. He took 2 steps and stood at her left shoulder. Hannah pressed the button. The Admiral's right calf contracted. The toes of his right foot inside the dress shoe curled half an inch upward against the leather. Caroline made a sound that was not quite a word. Eli sank down to his knees beside the wheelchair and pressed his forehead against his father's one hand. The Admiral was looking at the wall. He was breathing carefully, the way a man breathes when he has decided he will not weep in front of a stranger. He did not weep, but a single tear, just one, ran from the corner of his right eye down the line of his jaw and disappeared into the gray of his collar. Hannah turned the dial back to 0. She set the controller on the tray. She stood up. Dr. Prescott, I'm going to need an MRI, full lumbar and cervical with contrast, an EMG of the lower extremities, a peripheral nerve conduction study, and a referral to a physical medicine and rehab specialist who has worked with chronic disuse atrophy and spinal cord patients. Today, the Admiral and his family are going to need to stay in this hospital tonight. Prescott opened his mouth. Shut it. Opened it again. Whitlock. Yes, doctor. Who are you? Hannah did not answer for a long moment. She looked down at the stim mat on the Admiral's back, at the 12 copper points, at the small olive branch pin above her name tag. Then she looked up at Edwin Prescott. I'm the shift nurse, doctor. She paused. Now please go order the MRI. By 11:15 that morning, Bayford Memorial had begun to behave like a hospital that did not know what was happening inside one of its own glass rooms. The MRI suite on level 2 had been cleared. Dr. Marin Cho from radiology had been pulled out of a department meeting by a phone call from Dr. Prescott himself, which was unusual because Edwin Prescott had not personally requested a stat MRI for any patient in 9 years. The EMG technician, a man named Raoul, had been told to bring a portable cart to Bay 6 and wait. Hannah stood at the nurse's station outside Bay 6 and wrote quickly in pencil on a yellow legal pad. She did not write in the electronic record, not yet. She wrote in the shorthand of a person who had spent years writing reports that other people were not allowed to read. Sequence of stem response. Left quadriceps contraction at setting 2. Right calf contraction at setting 3. Distal toe response. Right foot setting 3. Patient pain report negative. Patient sensory report positive paresthesia, left lateral thigh. Implant marker palpated cervical C7 region intact. She underlined the word intact. Caroline walked up to the counter. Her eyes were swollen, but her hands had stopped shaking. Miss Whitlock, he's asking for you. Hannah set down the pencil. I'll come now. Inside Bay 6, the Admiral had been dressed again. The cardigan was buttoned. The gray blanket lay across his lap. He looked the same as he had at 8:30. To anyone walking past the glass, he was still a paralyzed old man in a wheelchair. But Hannah saw the difference. His shoulder sat a quarter-inch higher. His chin was up. His eyes followed her when she entered, instead of staring at the floor. Eli was sitting on the exam stool by the wall, his hands in his lap, his eyes red. Caroline took her place at the head of the chair. The Admiral spoke first. Ma'am, Hannah, before they take me down to the scanner, I would like to know something. Yes, sir. What's your name? Your real name. Hannah did not answer right away. She walked across the small room and pulled the exam stool closer. She sat down at eye level with him. She placed her hands, palms down, on her knees. My name is Hannah Whitlock, Admiral. That part is real, but not all of it. No, sir, not all of it. What part isn't? Hannah looked at Caroline. She looked at Eli. She looked back at the Admiral. He was a flag officer of the United States Navy. He had held secrets for 40 years. She made a small decision then. Lieutenant Colonel Hannah Whitlock, she said quietly. United States Army, retired. I was a medical officer with the Joint Special Operations Medical Research Group between 2010 and 2015. My program was based at Walter Reed on Sublevel 2. We studied long-term outcomes for soldiers who had received subdermal vagal conduction, bridges in the field. Most of those soldiers did not survive long enough to be studied. The ones who did, we tracked. We refined the STEM protocols. We were preparing a paper for declassification when the program was shut down in 2015, after a change in funding priorities. The work was filed. The implants, the mats, the protocols, all of it was sealed. I left the Army the following spring. I went to nursing school. I came here. The Admiral did not speak. Caroline's hand was over her mouth again. Why did you stop, ma'am? The Admiral said. Why did you become a nurse? Hannah was quiet for a few seconds. Because, sir, in 2015, I had a list of 41 names, 41 men who had received the implant in the field and survived. I knew where they were. I knew that 28 of them were still alive, and after the program closed, I was told I would never be allowed to contact any of them, not to inform them what they had received, not to offer them the protocol, not to tell their families that there was still signal in their cords. I tried to fight that decision through channels. I lost. I resigned my commission. I came to Boston because I had a cousin here. I went to nursing school because I could not bear to be in a hospital where I had to pretend I was something more than a nurse. I have worked at Bayford Memorial for 9 years. In that time, I have never once opened that pouch in my work bag, until today. The Admiral looked at her for a long, long time. Then he said, I was on that list. Yes, sir. How did you know? I read your file, sir, twice. When I was a captain, your name was number 14. The Admiral closed his eyes. He kept them closed for almost a minute. Then he opened them and said, very quietly, "Ma'am, I owe you an apology. I have spent 20 years believing that I was a man whose body had been broken in a way that nobody could fix. I have spent 20 years sitting in this chair telling my children to stop hoping. I have been wrong about myself for 2 decades, and the only reason I am not still wrong this morning is because you walked into Bay 6, and you saw a scar that nobody else had bothered to look at." Hannah did not answer. The Admiral lifted his right hand off the blanket. He held it out across the small space between them. Hannah took it. He squeezed. Not hard, not weakly. Just enough. "Lieutenant Colonel, thank you." Hannah's eyes were very steady, but her throat closed for half a second. She nodded once. She did not let go of his hand. The glass door opened. Dr. Prescott was standing there. He had changed his white coat for a fresh one. His hair was still parted with precision, but a single strand had escaped at the temple. The look on his face was the look of a man who had spent an hour in his office on the phone with people he did not want to call, and who had been told by every one of them the same thing. Whitlock. His voice was different now, not the voice from this morning. "Yes, Doctor. Doctor Cho is ready an MRI. I have spoken with the VA liaison. I have spoken with Bayford's risk management office. I have spoken with the dean of the medical school. The Admiral will be admitted under my service as the attending of record, but you will be the clinical lead on the case." Hannah did not blink. "Yes, Doctor. I'm told you have prior credentials that you have not disclosed on your employment file. My military credentials were sealed at the time of my separation. I had no obligation to disclose them." Prescott's jaw worked. "I have been instructed by the dean's office to extend you full clinical privileges for the duration of this case. Dr. Cho and Dr. Lavery in physical medicine will report to you. I will, of course, remain involved." "Of course, Doctor." Prescott was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Ms. Whitlock, earlier today I told you to discharge this patient. I told you to submit your resignation. I wanted on the record in front of this family that I was wrong." Hannah looked at him. Her green eyes did not soften. "Dr. Prescott, the record will reflect whatever it needs to reflect. What matters now is the Admiral's scan." Prescott nodded once. He stepped aside. Eli stood up from the exam stool. He picked up the gray blanket that had slipped from his father's lap. He folded it carefully, the way someone folds a flag, and laid it across the Admiral's knees. Caroline stepped behind the wheelchair and gripped the handles. "Ma'am." "Yes, sir. How long before I know if I can stand?" Hannah was quiet for a moment. "Admiral, I'm not going to lie to you. The MRI will tell us how much of your cord is intact. The EMG will tell us how much muscle is still innervated. If everything I think is true, you will spend the next 6 months in the hardest physical therapy of your entire life. Harder than basic. Harder than anything you have done since Mosul. And at the end of it, sir, I think you will stand. I do not promise you walk, but I promise you stand." The Admiral closed his eyes. 6 months? "Yes, sir. I have waited 20 years, Lieutenant Colonel. I think I can wait 6 months. Caroline began to push the chair toward the door. The Admiral lifted his hand once in a small Navy half-salute. Hannah returned it. The door closed behind them. The corridor outside was full of people now. 2 more nurses, a resident, Dr. Cho, Raoul the EMG tech with his cart, a man in a dark suit from the VA office. They parted as the wheelchair came through, and followed it down the long hall toward the elevators. Edwin Prescott stayed in Bay 6. Hannah turned and began to put the stim mat back in its pouch. Her hands were perfectly steady. "Whitlock." She looked up. "Yes, Doctor." Prescott was looking at the floor. He was a man who did not look at floors. He cleared his throat. 41 names? "Yes, Doctor." 28 alive in 2015? "Yes, Doctor." "How many alive now?" Hannah closed the pouch. "I don't know, Doctor. I have not been allowed to look." Prescott nodded slowly. He looked up. His face was older than it had been at 8:30 that morning. "Lieutenant Colonel, I am going to make a phone call this afternoon to the Dean, to the Chairman of the Board, and to the head of Bayford's Research Foundation. I am going to recommend the establishment of a clinical program at this hospital for the identification and treatment of long-term survivors of field neurosurgical interventions. I am going to recommend that you be named director." Hannah looked at him for a long, level moment. "Dr. Prescott, if you do that, you will need to do it because it is the right thing to do for those men, not because you are uncomfortable about what happened in this room this morning." Prescott did not flinch. "I understand. Thank you, Doctor." Hannah picked up the pouch and her yellow legal pad. She walked past him toward the door. At the threshold, she paused. And doctor, yes. Coffee on the desk, black, no sugar. The 8:30 file is on top. She walked out into the corridor. The bright, vivid blue of her scrubs moved down the hall and disappeared around the corner toward the elevators. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the MRI was done. Dr. Marinshow came back with the films herself rather than send them through the system. She found Hannah in the staff lounge, half a sandwich in front of her, untouched. Whitlock, may I sit? Please. Cho slid a tablet onto the table. She did not turn it around. She looked at Hannah for a long moment. How did you know? I told you, doctor. The scar. The cord at L1 is not transected. It is compressed. It is atrophied, but the dura is intact. There is a bright signal along the lateral aspect that I have never seen in 20 years of reading these films. It looks like a parallel filament, almost like a second cord running outside the column. It is not a second cord. It is the bridge. The subdermal vagal conduction bridge. Yes, doctor. Cho was quiet. You said this technology does not exist in our literature. It doesn't. I am going to need to learn it. Yes, doctor. So is the rest of the country. Cho looked at the tablet. She looked at Hannah. Her hand was on the device, but it was trembling just slightly in a way that Hannah recognized. The way a doctor's hand trembles when the floor of what she believes shifts under her. Lieutenant Colonel. Yes. 20 years. He's been in that chair for 20 years. Yes. I read the films at Mass General the year I started. I have read every film of his spine that exists. None of us saw this signal. Not one of us. Doctor, the bridge is not visible on standard imaging. The signal only appears when you know what frequency band to amplify. The protocol is in the declassified Walter Reed packet from 2016. It was published as a footnote in a single appendix. A footnote? Yes, doctor. Cho stood up. She picked up her tablet. She did not say anything else. She walked out of the staff lounge with the careful steps of a person who has just received instructions she does not yet know how to follow. Raoul came in 20 minutes later with the EMG. Strong residual motor neuron activity in 3 of 4 major lower extremity muscle groups. Quadriceps both sides, right calf, left tibialis anterior. The hamstrings on both sides were weak but present. Hannah wrote the numbers down on her yellow legal pad. Her hand did not shake. By 2:40 she was walking down the long hall to the patient suite they had given the family. Caroline met her in the corridor before she reached the door. The daughter's eyes were rimmed red, but her hands had stopped shaking some hours ago. Ms. Whitlock. Caroline. He's going to walk. Hannah looked at her. He has the cord to work with. He has the muscles to work with. He has the nerves to deliver signal. He now has to do 6 months of the hardest work of his life. But yes, he is going to walk. Caroline put her hand over her mouth. She did not cry this time. She just nodded and turned away and walked 3 steps down the hall and stopped with her hand on the wall and stood very still. Hannah let her. By 3 o'clock, the meeting started. The dean of the medical school, Eleanor Pace, a small, precise woman in a gray suit, Prescott, risk management, 2 attorneys from Bayford's legal counsel, the VA liaison, a man Hannah did not yet know from the Bayford Foundation, and Hannah. Pace did not waste time. She wanted to know how Hannah had obtained the stim mat. Hannah told the truth. She had it when she left the Army. The program had been informally encouraged to retain personal training kits in the months before closure. The mat had been signed for under her name in the final inventory. The program was declassified in 2016. She had violated no laws by keeping it. The protocols were no longer secret. The VA liaison wanted to take the Admiral back to a VA facility. Hannah said no. Caroline, through her, said no. The Admiral, through his daughter, said no. Prescott said no. Bayford had assumed clinical responsibility. The liaison sat back in his pasymbol. He did not push. Then Pace asked the question Hannah had been waiting for. Lieutenant Colonel, how many other men are out there? Hannah did not flinch. 41 originally, 28 alive when I last had access to the list, 11 years ago. We need to find them. Yes, ma'am. I want a task force. I want it built today. I want you running it. Hannah looked at Prescott. Prescott did not look surprised. He nodded once. How long do we have? Pace asked. Some of those men, ma'am, have been in chairs for almost a quarter century. Their peripheral nerves are degrading by the month. Every man we reach in the next 6 weeks has the best chance. After that, the window starts to close person by person. Pace took a long breath. Then we move today. What do you need? I need a phone. I need the Department of Defense to declassify the original outcome file from the program. I need a small clinical team, 3 nurses minimum, and 1 physical therapist who is military experienced. I need legal cover. I need transportation budget for men who cannot fly commercial. And I need a press officer, because by tomorrow morning the local news will have this. Pace nodded once. Done. By 4 o'clock she was in a new office. They had moved her. A small empty room on the 2nd floor next to the neurology library. 3 folding chairs, a desk, a phone, a window that looked out on the parking lot. She did not need more. She made a call to her former CEO at Walter Reed. The number was disconnected. 9 years. She made another call. Captain Daria Beck, now Dr. Daria Beck, private neurology practice in Bethesda. Daria picked up on the 3rd ring. Hannah, Dar, I just saw the news. Tell me it's true. It's true. Oh my God. Dar, I need help. I have 28 names. I need to find them. I need the original implant files. I need someone who knows the protocol and is not afraid. I'll be there tomorrow morning. Hannah, yes. I've been waiting for this call for 11 years. Same, Dar. Hannah hung up. She closed her eyes for a moment. Then she opened them and made the next call. And the next. By 5 o'clock, the first call came in from the outside. A woman in New Hampshire. Her name was Diane Voss. Her husband James was a former Marine. He was paralyzed from the chest down in 2005. IED outside Najaf. He had a scar on his neck just like the one on the local news. He was 63. They lived in Manchester. Could someone please help? Hannah closed her eyes. James Voss. Number 23 on the list. Mrs. Voss. Yes, someone can help. My name is Hannah Whitlock. I'm going to give you an address and a time. Can you bring James to Boston tomorrow afternoon? Yes. Yes, we can. Yes. She paused. Ma'am, he hasn't slept through a night in 19 years. Will it really work? Mrs. Voss, I won't promise you he will walk, but I will promise you he will sleep. The implant has been quietly carrying a small electrical load against atrophied muscle for 2 decades. When we shut down that load, his body will rest in a way it has not rested since the day he was most injured. I have seen it happen. I will see it happen with him. On the other end of the line, Diane Voss began to cry. Quiet. Controlled. The kind of crying that does not get heard often. I'll be there tomorrow afternoon, ma'am. We will be ready, Mrs. Voss. Hannah hung up. She wrote the name on the yellow pad. James Voss, 23 Manchester. Tomorrow. The phone rang again and again. By 7 p.m., she had 6 names, 6 families, 6 men. By 9 o'clock, Caroline brought her a sandwich on a paper plate. Hannah ate it standing up at the desk. By 11 o'clock, the building was empty. The phone rang one more time. Unknown number. Hannah picked it up. A voice she had not heard in 11 years said her name. Lieutenant Colonel Whitlock. She closed her eyes. Colonel Breyer. We need to talk. Yes, sir, we do. I'll be in your office at 0700 tomorrow. I'll see you then. The line went dead. Hannah held the phone for a long moment. Then she set it down. She picked up her yellow pad. She turned to a fresh page. She wrote one word at the top. Intact. She underlined it. She turned off the office light and walked home through Boston in the dark. Colonel Roman Breyer walked into Hannah's office at 6:58 the next morning. He had aged. He was 68 now. The hair was gone. The suit was charcoal gray and well cut. The federal lawyer behind him was younger, mid-40s, in a darker suit, carrying a leather folder. They sat across from Hannah without being invited. Breyer set the folder on the desk. He did not open it. Lieutenant Colonel, you removed protected materials from a Department of Defense facility in 2015. I removed personal training equipment that had been signed out under my name. The materials were declassified in 2016. You and I both know that. You have been using those materials to perform unauthorized clinical interventions on civilians. I have been using legal equipment to perform clinical interventions on retired military personnel with full informed consent. The interventions are within the scope of the published, declassified protocol. The lawyer cleared his throat. Ms. Whitlock, Lieutenant Colonel. The lawyer paused. Lieutenant Colonel Whitlock, there are national security implications. There were national security implications, Hannah said. In 2015, there are not in 2026. The protocol has been public for 10 years. The implants are no longer manufactured. There is no operational sensitivity left to protect. What you are protecting, counselor, is the embarrassment of a department that left 41 men in chairs because the funding moved. The lawyer's mouth closed. Breyer's jaw tightened. I am not interested in arguing the merits, Whitlock. I am interested in stopping further unauthorized procedures until the Department of Defense conducts a formal review. How long would that review take? 18 months. 18 months. Hannah did not move her hands from where they were folded on the desk. There are 27 men still out there, Colonel. 11 years older than the last time you and I had this conversation. 3 of them, I have already learned, died waiting. The rest are losing function by the day. Do you understand what 18 months means to a man whose peripheral nerves have been atrophying since 2005? I understand the law. So do I. The door opened. Prescott was first. Behind him, Eleanor Pace. Behind her, a tall, older man Hannah did not recognize in a suit that did not quite hide 30 years in uniform. Behind him, 2 more attorneys. Pace did not sit. She stood at the head of the desk, and she looked down at Breyer. Colonel, my name is Elena Pace. I am Dean of the Bayford Medical School. This is Major General Frank Olivetti, U.S. Army retired, who chairs our Medical Ethics Committee. Before you continue, I would like to inform you that I have spent the last 14 hours on the phone with the offices of 3 United States Senators, 2 of whom serve on the Armed Services Committee, the Office of the Surgeon General of the Army, and the legal counsel of 2 veterans' rights organizations. Bayford Memorial is prepared to pursue any legal or institutional action necessary to defend Lieutenant Colonel Whitlock and her work. Are you prepared to defend the 11-year delay your department imposed on these men in federal court? Breyer's jaw worked. He did not speak. Olivetti spoke next. His voice was a quiet rumble that did not need to be loud. Roman, stand down. The program was wrong to close. You and I both know that. The men we left on that list were ours. She's bringing them back. Let her. Breyer looked at Olivetti. Olivetti did not blink. The federal lawyer leaned over and whispered something to Breyer. Breyer's mouth pressed into a thin line. He stood up. He picked up the unopened folder. He looked at Hannah for a long moment. Lieutenant Colonel, I want you to know I objected to the closure in 2015. I lost that fight. Hannah did not answer. I should have done what you did. Yes, sir. You should have. Breyer nodded once. He turned. He walked out. The federal lawyer followed him. Pace closed the door behind them. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Olivetti turned to Hannah. He brought his right hand up to his temple. He saluted her. Hannah stood. She returned the salute. Olivetti nodded once and left. Pace sat down in the chair Breyer had been in. She placed a hand flat on the desk. Lieutenant Colonel, get to work. Hannah did. Daria Beck arrived at 10 o'clock that same morning. She walked into the second-floor office with a black canvas duffel and a hard expression that broke the moment she saw Hannah. The 2 women looked at each other across the desk for a long moment. Then Daria set down the duffel and they embraced. Quick, hard. 11 years compressed into 4 seconds. They did not speak about it. There was no time. By 10:30, Daria had pulled 3 more files from the duffel. Copies she had kept. Copies the program had never gotten back. Hannah looked at the names. She wrote them on the yellow pad. 3 more men, 2 in Virginia, 1 in Arizona. By that afternoon, the press photographer who had been waiting in the lobby had taken the seeking that ran the following morning on the front page of the Boston Globe under a single line. She waited 11 years. By noon the same day, 3 more families had called. By the end of the week, 14. The Admiral began physical therapy the day after the MRI. Parallel bars in a small, bright room on the 4th floor. A young physical therapist named Leanna, who had run track at Boston College and spent 2 years at Walter Reed before coming to Bayford. Leanna knew what she was doing. She did not coddle the Admiral. On 3, Admiral, push down through your right heel. 1, 2, 3. The Admiral pushed. His leg shook. The right knee straightened half a degree. He gasped. Caroline watched from doorway. Eli held one of the bars. Hannah stood at the back of the room with her arms folded. Again, Liana said. The Admiral did it again. Half a degree more. By the end of the first week, he could hold his own weight for 4 seconds supported on the bars. By the end of the second week, 8. By the end of the 4th week, he stood unsupported for 2 full seconds while Liana let go of his belt. Hannah did not say anything during these sessions. She just watched. The first time the Admiral took a step, end of the 7th week, he did it without warning. Liana had just adjusted the bars. The Admiral looked up at her. He said, "Move back, ma'am." Liana moved back. The Admiral let go of the right bar. He shifted his weight. He moved his right foot forward 6 in. He set it down. He moved his left foot forward 6 inch. He set it down. Then he gripped the bar again and lowered himself into the chair. He looked at Hannah, who had been standing by the door. He did not smile. He nodded once. Hannah nodded back. In the meantime, James Voss came to Boston, then Sam Reeves from Pittsburgh, then a man named Eduardo Ortega from Texas, who had been in a chair since 2006, and who broke into ragged sobs the first time Hannah pressed her finger to the marker on his neck. She kept her face composed for him. She wept later, alone, in the stairwell at the end of the third-floor neurology wing, where nobody went. James Voss did sleep that first night. His wife told Hannah in the hallway the next morning that her husband had not slept 8 hours in 1903, and that she had sat in the chair beside his hospital bed all night, watching him breathe, and that at one point she had touched his hand, and his hand had moved back just an inch, just enough. The wife was a tall woman with iron-gray hair, and she did not cry while she told Hannah this. She just kept her hand on Hannah's forearm and squeezed once. Doug Kerrigan came in late June. He had served alongside the Admiral in Mosul, number 31 on the list. The first thing he said when he saw Hannah was, "Ma'am, my wife wants to know if you take hugs." "On occasion, Mr. Kerrigan." "This is one of those occasions." His wife hugged her. Hannah did not let her face move, but her hand stayed pressed against the woman's and shoulder for 3 full seconds before she stepped back. Not everyone could be saved. One of the original 28 had died of unrelated illness in 2020. 3 could not be located despite the FBI being involved. 3 more were too far gone. The muscles too atrophied, the implants too degraded, the bodies too tired. Hannah met with each of them. She did not lie. She told them what the technology could and could not do. They thanked her anyway. One of them, a man named Walter Yates, who had been a ranger in 2004, gripped her hand at the end of the meeting. "You came back for us, Lieutenant Colonel. You came back." "Yes, sir. I came back." He died 6 weeks later. His wife wrote Hannah a letter. The letter said only one line. He died knowing somebody had remembered. Hannah kept the letter in the top drawer of her desk. That night, Hannah sat alone in her office until 2 o'clock in the morning. The phone did not ring. The building was quiet. She held her right hand in front of her and watched it shake. Not from fear, not exactly. She had carried that pouch for 11 years. She had carried those names for 11 years. She put her hand down. She picked up the pencil. She turned to a fresh page on the yellow pad. She wrote a number at the top, 18. She underlined it. She turned off the office light. She walked home through Boston for the second time that week, and the air was colder than she remembered it being in any November before this one. And the street lights were on in long, even rows, and she did not feel small. 6 months after the morning, Hannah Whitlock walked into Bay 6 and saw a scar. Bayford Memorial held a small ceremony in the hospital auditorium. It was not a press event. Those had already happened. There had been 3 weeks of national coverage in November, after the Globe's first story, then a quieter month, then a piece in the New England Journal of Medicine in February, with both Hannah's name and Prescott's on it. Prescott had insisted. The journal piece was technical, the press coverage was not. The ceremony today was internal. The dean, the board, Bayford staff, the veterans and their families. The auditorium held 200 people. It was full. In the front 3 rows sat the men, 12 of them, each wearing his service uniform. Marines, Army, Navy, Air Force. Each one had been in a chair when Hannah opened the pouch in November. Each one was now standing for at least part of the day. 6 of them walked with canes, 4 with light braces, 2 unassisted. Eduardo Ortega in his Marine dress blues, James Voss beside him in his, Sam Reeves in Army Class A, Doug Kerrigan in Navy whites, 6 others in various combinations of dress uniform. Some of the men had lost so much weight in their years of paralysis that their uniforms hung loose. They had been told they could wear civilian clothes, and they had refused. Every man in that front row had spent weeks of his recovery driving back to a tailor or to a closet, at home where the uniform had been packed in mothballs since the year of his injury. Every one of them wore it today. Behind them sat the rest. Other recovering veterans, those still in the early stages, their families, their physical therapists. Leanna, in the 3rd row with her arms folded and her eyes bright. Daria Beck, 2 seats down, dressed for once not in a lab coat, but in a charcoal suit. The dean of the medical school in the row behind them. 2 senators quietly in the 2nd row. In the very back stood Prescott, hands behind his back. His silver hair parted with the same precision, but with a little more gray now than there had been in November. The dean spoke first. Briefly, she introduced the program. She introduced the men. She introduced the doctors and the nurses and the therapists. She did not introduce Hannah. Hannah had asked her not to. Then she said, "Admiral Briggs has asked for the floor." The room went still. Admiral Harlan Briggs stood up from his seat in the front row. He used a cane. His left hand rested on Eli's shoulder. The boy, not a boy anymore, 20 years old, a sophomore at Boston College, stood up with him. The Admiral let go of his son's shoulder. He walked to the lectern. The auditorium was utterly silent. The only sound was the slow, deliberate click of the cane on the polished floor. He had not walked to a lectern in 21 years. He reached the podium. He set the cane against the side. He gripped the lectern with both hands. He looked out at the room. "I was paralyzed for 20 years, he said. "I was told by 10 doctors in 7 hospitals across 3 countries that I would die in a wheelchair. I told my children to stop hoping. I told my late wife to stop hoping. I stopped hoping for myself." He paused. He looked down at the lectern. He looked up. "On a Monday morning in November of last year, my daughter brought me to this hospital. A nurse named Hannah Whitlock came into the exam room. She did her job. She looked at me. She actually looked at me. The room had not moved. In 6 months, with the help of every person in this room and many people not in this room, 18 men who had been forgotten by the United States government have stood up out of their chairs. 3 more are coming next month. 5 more in the spring. 3 of them I will not be able to thank in person because they did not live to see this day. To Walter Yates, Andrew Halloran, and Marcus Pell, I owe you my standing here. I do not forget that." His voice did not shake. 40 years of speaking to ships had taught him that. "I want to thank the staff of Bayford Memorial. I want to thank my children, Caroline and Eli, who never stopped hoping, even when I told them to. I want to thank the doctors and the therapists and the nurses and the orderlies and the food, service workers and the night cleaners. I want to thank Dr. Edwin Prescott, who had the courage to be wrong publicly and the courage to be right privately." Prescott did not move at the back of the room. "And I want to thank one more person, a person whose name does not appear on any of the official program documents, a person who is by every formal measure available to the United States military, only a nurse." The Admiral's eyes moved across the front row. His eyes moved man by man. Eduardo Ortega met his eyes, then James Voss, then Sam Reeves, then Doug Kerrigan. Each of them, in his turn, gave the Admiral the smallest possible nod. "Lieutenant Colonel Hannah Whitlock," the Admiral said, "would you come forward?" Hannah was in the second row. She had not expected this part. She had been told there would be a presentation. She had not been told it would include her. She stood up. She was in scrubs, bright, vivid blue, the olive branch pin above her name tag. She walked to the front. Her shoes were quiet on the carpet. The Admiral stepped from behind the lectern. He did not use the cane. He walked the 3 steps to her on his own legs, slow and deliberate and steady, and the room watched him do it. He stopped in front of her. He brought his right hand up to his temple, slow and deliberate and steady, and he saluted her. In the front 3 rows, 12 men stood up, Marines, soldiers, sailors, airmen. Each of them, 6 men on canes, 4 in light braces, 2 unassisted, pushed himself to his feet. Each of them brought his hand up to his temple. They held it. The room held its breath. From the second row, Daria Beck stood. She was in a civilian suit. She brought her right hand up to her temple. From the third row, Leona stood. So did 3 other military experienced staff Hannah had not even known were in the audience. They saluted. From the very back of the room, Edwin Prescott, who had never served a day in any uniform, brought his right hand up to his temple in the imperfect civilian approximation of a salute, and he held it. Hannah's throat closed. Her eyes were level. Her chin was level. She raised her right hand, the one with the shrapnel scar, the one that had pressed the marker, the one that had not opened the pouch for 11 years, and she returned the salute. She held it. Then she dropped her hand. The men in the front row dropped theirs. Leanna and Daria dropped theirs. Prescott dropped his. The room began to applaud, not loud at first, then louder, then long. It went on for almost a full minute. Caroline was crying. Eli was crying. The Admiral was not crying, but his eyes were very bright. The Admiral stepped closer. He spoke quietly so that only Hannah could hear. "The Department of the Navy and the Department of the Army have, with my recommendation and the recommendations of 7 flag officers, formally requested that you accept reinstatement to active duty as the inaugural director of the Joint Combat Recovery Research Program with the rank of full colonel." Hannah was quiet for a long moment. She looked at the 12 men. She looked at their families. She looked at Daria. She looked at the Admiral. Sir, I am honored, but I am going to decline. The Admiral did not flinch. I left the Army for a reason. I came to Bayford for a reason. I would like to remain director of the Bayford Clinical Restoration Program as a civilian, as a nurse. The men on that list deserve to be seen by a civilian who had the courage to look at them, not by a soldier in a chain of command that once told me to look away. I will work with the Department of Defense. I will accept full clinical privileges as recommended. I will sit on every joint committee they want me to sit on, but I will keep my scrubs, and I will keep my pin. She touched the olive branch on a Navy field above her name tag. The Admiral nodded once. Understood, Lieutenant Colonel. Civilian or otherwise, Bayford is fortunate. He stepped back. He returned to the lectern. He picked up his cane. He looked at the room. That concludes the formal portion of the program. I would like to invite all of you to the reception hall. The applause came back, louder this time. The Admiral walked back to his seat under his own power. Eli helped him sit. Caroline kissed his forehead. The room broke into movement, conversation, embraces. The unfamiliar sound of laughter after 20 years. Hannah stood for a moment at the front of the auditorium, her hand on her pin. The James Voss came to her first. He did not speak. He just gripped her right hand in both of his, and held it. Then Eduardo Ortega. Then Sam Reeves. Then Doug Kerrigan, who said, "Ma'am, my granddaughter was born last month. She's going to grow up knowing her grandfather standing up." Hannah said, "That's all I needed to hear, Mr. Kerrigan." Caroline Briggs came last. She put her arms around Hannah without asking. She held her for 5 full seconds. Hannah held her back. Then Caroline stepped away, took a breath, and said, "My father has not slept in his own bedroom for 20 years. We moved him to the ground floor of the house in 2004. This weekend he is walking up the stairs. He told me yesterday morning that he wants his old room back. Ms. Whitlock, I do not know how to thank you for that. Caroline, you do not owe me any thanks. Your father did the work. You did the work. Eli did the work. I just opened a pouch. You opened a pouch nobody else knew was there. Yes, that is everything." Caroline walked back to her father. Hannah watched her go. Eli was already at the Admiral's side. The three of them stood together near the front row, Caroline's hand on her father's back, Eli's hand on his other shoulder, the Admiral leaning on either of them, leaning on his own legs. And for a moment, Hannah forgot to breathe. Prescott came up beside her. He was holding 2 paper cups of coffee. He handed her one. Black, no sugar. "Lieutenant Colonel, Doctor. There are 3 names left we haven't reached." "I know, Doctor. I want to keep looking." "Yes, Doctor." He paused. Hannah, she looked at him. "Thank you." She nodded once. She took a sip of the coffee. It was the right temperature. She walked out of the auditorium and down the long hallway toward the elevators. The fluorescent lights hummed the way they always had. The lavender disinfectant smelled the way it always had. Bayford Memorial in late autumn light through the high windows. The 3rd floor was waiting. She stepped off the elevator. She walked past the consultation desk where Prescott had once asked her for coffee in a voice that did not look at her. She walked past Bay 4 where she had restocked supplies 6 months ago. She walked toward the end of the corridor. Bay 6. There was a new patient inside. A woman this time, mid-50s, a scar on her neck. Through the glass, Hannah could see the woman's daughter at her side, gripping the handles of the chair. She could see the woman's husband, exhausted, in the corner. She could see the woman herself, head down, looking at her hands. Hannah paused at the door. She breathed in through her nose. She pushed the door open. "Good morning. I'm Hannah Whitlock. I'll be your intake nurse today."